Hello, everyone, and welcome to our session, Leadership in Electrification, Navigating Global Markets, Innovation, and Industry Transformation. I'm Sarah Jensen, editor of Power in Motion, and I'm pleased to be moderating today's discussion. Before we get started, just a quick note for our audience. If you have questions throughout the session, please feel free to submit them using the Q&A function, and we'll do our best to address them toward the end of our discussion. So electrification continues to evolve across industrial sectors, and it's clear that the path forward is anything but uniform. Different regions, regulatory environments, and market conditions are shaping adoption at different speeds and in different ways. At the same time, companies are balancing innovation across electrification, automation, and digital technologies. Um, and um, And so, everyone is navigating economic pressures and shifting customer expectations. What makes this moment particularly interesting is that the conversation has moved beyond early momentum and into a more complex real world phase where leadership decisions, strategic priorities, and practical execution are playing an even greater role. Today, we'll explore how industry leaders are navigating these challenges, what they're seeing across global markets, and how they're making decisions to continue driving innovation and growth in an evolving electrification landscape. So, joining me today for the discussion on these topics are Sarah McKinnon, CEO of Delta Q Technologies, who brings deep insight into customer needs and application trends across electrification markets, as well as Klaus Avashu, Executive Director at Zappi Group, who offers a global perspective on strategy, regional dynamics, and industry evolution. So, thank you both for joining me today.
Thank you. Good morning. Good
Thank you.
afternoon.
All right, so to start our conversation, how are you guys seeing current global geopolitical dynamics, including developments in the Middle East, influencing the economy and the pace of electrification? Maybe Klaus, if you'd like to start that.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I mean, we live in a world with geopolitical ruptures, climate pressure, technological disruption, and all of this no longer arrive one at a time. They are here all at once. So we as leader, we have the future challenge here today. It's on the today's agenda, you could say. And we have, for example, seen the oil price go up 50% this year. So energy price volatility and could push inflation. And in general, that could, in a way, be positive for electrification because the business case could be stronger. But it could also accelerate, energy security strategies for companies, but also for governments. We see some shift also in investments due to uncertainty and risk and the capital flow and supply chain has also critical pressure specifically on some conflicts regarding material rare earth magnets and so on. So in summary, I think it introduced the Middle East here introduced some short-term headwinds. We see cost could go up, delays, financing stress, and so on. But it also strengthened the business case for electrification, could push for decentralization, for more resilience, low carbon energy, and accelerating, the policy around electrification in some regions.
Yeah, echo Klaus's comments there. I mean, right now we're really in the middle of it. The situation is, as everybody knows, very dynamic and resulting in a lot of uncertainty for business and in terms of investment, but also possibly an opportunity. I would say as an organization right now, we need to double down on kind of these operational issues, dealing with the resulting kind of longer lead time, supply chain challenges, some of the impacts on component pricing, and different factors like that mean that businesses are really kind of heads down trying to manage this very dynamic situation. But depending on the outcome, I do believe it could be a real opportunity to re-accelerate electrification.
Mhm. Okay, great. So, how would you describe the current state of electrification across the markets your companies serve, and how has that maybe evolved over the past year? And maybe Sarah, I'll start with you this time.
Sure. Thank you. I was looking back at the notes for the event we held last year at about this time, and there's some things that have stayed about the same, and other markets that have really changed. And so, if we think about electrification, it really varies. The adoption it really varies both by market or application and by geography or by region. And so we really think about electrification in two different categories. One being traditional markets. And these are markets where I think about Delta Q or the rest of Zappi Group that have really had solutions that have been electric for years or even decades. And these are applications such as lift trucks or material handling, aerial work platforms, or say scissor lifts, and personal equipment like electric golf carts. And these are businesses or industries where the business case has made sense for a very long time. And that business, despite the uncertainty we've seen, this year, last year, and really for the last 5 to 6 years, despite that uncertainty, these particular applications have continued to be relatively stable and are actually growing because of new factors, which I'll talk about in a minute. It's the emerging markets where we've really seen a more dynamic change. So a few years ago, across regions or across geographies, there was a lot of talk about electrification in construction and agriculture. So really kind of big equipment going electric. The enthusiasm in those markets is really dampened for some for geopolitical reasons, different priorities. So we've seen those markets really soften in terms of demand relative to where we were a few years ago. But at the same time, given new technologies and end user preferences, we've seen new markets emerge around robotics and automation. And it is those robotics that kind of move towards robotics and automation that's actually had a positive impact on some of our very traditional markets. So, for example, with a scissor lift, that would have been a manually operated machine until very recently. And now we're looking at applications where that equipment can be automated, so the use case can even be expanded and can mitigate other risks like labor shortages or labor cost. So we're seeing changes in these traditional markets. So really the message is that the theme varies by market or application and by geography. And Klaus, maybe you want to touch a little bit on from the I'm speaking here from North America. Perhaps you want to speak a little bit about what you're seeing in Europe.
Yeah, sure. I just can mention that you mentioned these traditional electric markets like forklifts and area work platforms. The conversion from internal combustion engine to electric is ongoing, and maybe more rapidly so in China now, but already happened in Europe and ongoing in North America. Regarding the what you mentioned regarding construction and agriculture, here we see a lot of pilots ongoing.
Yes.
A lot of projects, but the scaling is not. It seems to be delayed. So I agree with you, Sarah. One area where we see traction is European city bus. So that's a market really converting, and it's really pushed by environmental reasons. Cities that want to profile themselves as environmental friendly, and also some some governments that push it. And we can also see it a little bit on the last mile trucks. So a little bit of electrification there ongoing. But overall, right now, with the uncertainty, there seems to be a little bit of a delay moving from pilot to scaling.
Yeah, and it's a great point, Klaus. And I mean, on that, so although we haven't seen that these applications, say in construction, going to scale, as businesses in the space, we are still investing because, as you pointed out, these companies, these OEMs are still testing. They're still looking at the application. They have very long design cycles as they sort out how to electrify some of these applications. And so, within the Zappi Group, for example, we're investing and working closely with these customers in this space, but the volume production, we're just not seeing the same level of demand as we had thought a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, so
I agree. I don't know if we lost our moderator Sarah here.
Nope, I'm still here. Just my camera went out for some
Okay,
reason. I'm sorry about
no
that,
problem.
but I'm
Thank
still
you.
here and still able to moderate and keep things moving along for
Thank
us.
you.
So, yeah. Thank you both for those great insights on where you're seeing the current state of the electrification market. And, maybe how have you guys seen market dynamics and key themes shift since last year's discussion on electrification? I don't know if Klaus, you'd like to start this time?
Yeah, I think if I start with the city bus, we see that battery cost is coming down, which means that the total cost of ownership is improving. So you can really now see where electrification applications actually can save money over the life cycle or total life cycle of the vehicles. And here we clearly see a shift from the pilot to the scale, and city bus is increasing. We can clearly see also some more integrated solutions, where they put things together, which is indicating a more focus on volume than on pilots. We also see something on the digital side, interoperability, cybersecurity, fleet management, and such coming. And I think with the pilot, it was a question which tech to use. Now the question is more how to scale. We can also see some regional factors, but maybe we come back to that.
Yeah, Klaus, just on your point, just to tie your
Yeah.
point about the city buses back to your opening comments about energy prices, right? What we're really seeing in these markets is doubling down, looking at the business case as being the number one priority or the number one rationale for electrification. And so as we see what happens or what shakes out of this Middle East conflict and continued pressure on both price and access to fuel, there is an opportunity in those kinds of applications for continued kind of growth and scale, directly linked to what's happening in the world today.
No, it's a great point. I mean, Lufthansa today announced that they're
Yes.
canceling 20,000 flights due to high fuel price. So you don't know what comes tomorrow. That's why we are.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, things are definitely constantly up in the air, so to speak, aren't they? Okay. So, Klaus, you kind of mentioned regional factors. How are regional factors such as regulations, infrastructure, energy economics, or customer demand kind of shaping the pace of electrification globally from your perspective?
Well, it's completely different, I would say, in China, in Europe, in US. If you look at China, I mean, it's state-driven industrial policy, large-scale targets, subsidies to push the electrification. Whereas Europe, it's more on regulation. It's regulation-driven, carbon pricing, standards and so on. And in US, it's a little bit of a patchwork, I would say. You have some federal incentives, you have some IRA, for example, and such, but it's a mix. And if you look at the pace of change, I mean, China, it's rapid, it's large scale rollout, and electrification really makes a difference. In Europe, it's more slow, steady, policy driven on this transition. And US, you see some fast installations driven by incentives, and also, California, Texas, and so on. But it's a little bit of a patchwork. And financing is completely different. In China, state-driven. In Europe, you have investors, but it's all based on where you see the regulation coming in, and in the US, it's tax-driven, or incentives-driven. So a mix of many different things, but in summary, I think China is moving the fastest, both on scale and manufacturing, and Europe is basing it on regulation, taking it steady but step by step, decarbonizing and the standards and so on. And in US, you see a mix, as I said.
One thing I'd add to that is if we contrast where we were a year or two ago, there has been some changes by region. So if we think about Europe, there's been a bit of a walk back from Klaus mentioned, the regulatory environment, but I would say there's been a real walk back of a very strong regulatory presence and a very strong focus on sustainability as being kind of the number 1 and 2 priorities for electrification. I believe that's really shifted back towards business case and where the business case and the return on that investment that Klaus mentioned makes sense. So that's a quite big shift for Europe. And in North America, even more so. So I think more about kind of the geopolitical themes, what the trend right now is not around electrification or carbon reduction. And so we're seeing that at the federal level with reduction of available incentive programs, which means programs are again being put on hold. So same result, it all comes back to the business case. And so bringing it back to this, the perspective of these traditional markets where the business case has been proven for a long time, those markets continue to thrive. Whereas the emerging markets, the business case is still a bit in flux. Now, without these other drivers around government, as many government incentives or a push towards sustainability. So very interesting time. Again, very different by region and by market. And because we haven't touched much on robotics and automation, but we'll make sure we touch on that because that's another driver for where the business makes sense, versus relying on kind of government or other incentives to make this transition to electric. So
I agree.
Yeah.
All right. Well, maybe we'll shift our discussion now to applications and some of the customer priorities you guys are seeing. What applications are currently proving most beneficial for electrification, and where do you see adoption gaining the most traction? Sarah, I'll start with you this time.
Sure. And I was just talking about some of these traditional applications that have been electric for a long time. But one of the things we're seeing within those markets or within those applications is the impact of both consumer preference and some other kind of trends that are happening back again to different geographic differences. So specifically in North America, we're seeing a move to onshoring for manufacturing. That's resulting in an increase in automation to provide certainty of cost and to offset labor risk or low cost labor risk. That increase in automation is enabling an increase in electrification. So you can essentially have an automated factory. So you're seeing interesting new applications like humanoids on a prototype production line, say for a vehicle, for example. And so within these traditional markets, we're seeing kind of new technologies driving electrification. The other impact in these the traditional markets is consumer preference and the growth of AI. So data centers, the requirement for data centers is leading to an increase in demand for construction of data centers. And so that's having a positive impact on, again, these kind of more traditional markets. So end user preferences and other kind of global trends are driving new demand within existing traditional markets. For these emerging markets, again, for the reasons that we've talked about, it very much comes down to the business case as a top priority, but also kind of looking at the application and is the infrastructure there and is the user preference there. A couple of years ago, I think there was a push to electrification for some segments where as they tried to scale, the infrastructure wasn't quite there, or the adoption wasn't as quick as different companies had anticipated. And so it really comes back today to business case as we look at these emerging markets.
Yeah. So what I can add is maybe where we see high utilization applications, we see the conversion going faster because you can really, the total cost of ownership can be justified. And I mentioned city bus, but this is already in forklifts and so on. But also, for example, port yard equipment. You can see some projects ongoing in North America, Europe, for sure in China. Whereas the more heavy duty long range is still in a pilot phase, like long haul trucks and such. So here we clearly see still a delay.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. And so what factors are customers prioritizing most from your perspective? The performance, total cost of ownership, or is sustainability still a priority for customers? Sarah, if you'd like to start on this one as well.
Sure. Kind of as I mentioned, as we talked about some of the regions, I would suggest, given kind of changing dynamics globally, sustainability is not the number one priority for making a decision to electrify an application. So it really does come down to cost, and both the cost of the component or the system, but then also, again, for emerging markets, looking at the total cost of ownership or the comparison to a combustion engine. And of course, in these times, the math is very dynamic given the price of fuel these days and where that shakes out. But really does come down to cost. And what we're seeing is a lot of cost pressure in our established market. So a lot more competition as the space is clearly very attractive. Increased competition both at the OEM and the component level, driving down cost of the components for an electric vehicle. Klaus talked a little bit about the government subsidies within China, benefiting possibly OEMs coming from that region who can be very competitive and really forcing OEMs around the world and providers of the equipment like ourselves to really innovate, to drive costs down, to ensure we remain competitive in markets where cost is absolutely number one. And that's not to say performance doesn't matter. That's a given. That you need to be providing a system that meets the requirements or exceeds the requirements, but it has to be at a lower cost than what we've seen before. So an interesting time to be in the space.
Yeah.
No, I agree, Sarah. I think the total cost of ownership leads to the purchase decision for a commercial fleet. So the operators are very cost sensitive. So it's really important. But I also agree to what you said regarding performance, and because uptime, reliability, it's kind of non-negotiable. So you still need to have it, and you cannot take it away. And I think we also see some some end users are still pushing for ESG targets. Air quality matters because they have corporate ESG targets, specifically in Europe, I think. So with some customer, you still have that, it still exists, let's say. But TCO driven, again, yes.
Yes.
Great. And so, trends like digitalization, automation, and artificial intelligence are continuing to evolve. How are you seeing these trends intersect with electrification, particularly based on, things you've maybe seen at recent trade shows such as ConExpo? Klaus, if you'd like to start.
Yeah, I think we clearly could see it on the system level. For example, AI-driven energy management or fleet management systems, and this is really could help and drive electrification. You can see some predictive maintenance and uptime. It's important. We could see in agriculture autonomous electric machines, which seems to be a big trend in agriculture, and it's much easier to build them electric. In construction, we could see software around digital twins and simulations. For sure, telematics and fleet software, as I mentioned. So cybersecurity is kind of a given. And, you have to be secure your data management, and we could also see some business model innovations. So all of this kind of enabled by electrification and the mix of software and AI. I don't know if you have something to add here.
No, I was just thinking about the evolution of those technologies. So an example we've seen in a market we haven't talked about yet today is the floor market. So several years ago now, within the floor market, OEMs started introducing automation and robotics for floor cleaning machines, and now we're seeing those autonomous vehicles expand into these kind of into larger equipment, into construction, like what you've mentioned. And again, for a couple of reasons, right? As companies look to as we look to mitigate labor costs or to provide certainty of uptime, and also just the technology that's available now through AI, for example, and using that technology for improving the overall system across a variety of markets. So it's a very interesting time to see how our customers evolve as AI continues to massively expand the value and what companies can do with the tools. So
yeah, it's a good point, because we could also see some improvements in human machine interfaces and the operator training, the driver assist with some sensors like cameras, vision systems, and almost AI coaching tools to make sure that the driver is behaving, an upskill to manage the application and driving the vehicle to optimize and so on. And another one is safety. So safety seems to be a big topic to improve, the work around the vehicle.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, great. Well, quick before we move on to our next questions, I just wanted to remind our audience, if you guys have any questions you would like to ask our panelists, please feel free to type those into the Q&A box on your screens, and we can get to those towards the end of our discussion. But we'll move on now maybe to the topic of, challenges and barriers. What are some of the biggest challenges you guys see customers facing when implementing electrification today? And how are you helping them address those challenges? Klaus, if you'd like to start.
Yeah, so one, I think we already talked about it last year, is regarding the grid and the charging bottlenecks to support the electrification. I think that still exists. It's different in different markets and different geographies, where we can see in China is highly supported, and in Europe there is a mix between different countries, and also in North America you can see it, California very well spread out, good charging capacity. Uncertainty drives a little bit of questions regarding the capex and the financing. So uncertainty in the total cost of ownership and the residual value for batteries has been a topic. I think it still is a question. Performance on the ranging is highly debated. To have enough range with the batteries I have, specifically for heavy duty applications, that still exist. And there are still, questions regarding charging. If you look at the cost, the grid cost, the operators, how should we split the revenue coming from charging? And another gap is, of course, training enough technicians to service and manage and make safe procedures around operating the vehicles. And that's a lot of training, because most of the technicians are today coming from the mechanical world, and now they're not electricians. So this is still a challenge to find enough people to help and support. I think still, it was also discussed last year, the supply chain, the risk of components shortage and so on, and now even with the oil crisis, transportation between regions, so supply chain is still a question mark. I mentioned earlier here integration. I think if you want to scale, you want to integrate and save cost on the application, the implementation. In some regions, you still see some regulatory, challenge, and also I think all batteries maybe are supplied in Asia, you could say. So that's still a question mark how the world will handle that. I think that's a few of them. Maybe Sarah, you have some more to add.
Well, I was just going to say, there's definitely some competing factors, some positive and some negative these days when you think about the transition to electrification. But maybe to turn the conversation around a little bit, when I think about the Zappi group, where we've evolved, or where I've seen us evolve over the last, multiple years, is moving away from delivering a number of components kind of separately and uniquely to delivering a system. So you talked about companies not having the skill set, but perhaps for service, but I would suggest also around the electrification of the equipment itself, being able as a supplier to an equipment manufacturer, being able to provide an overall solution. And again, not just the components. You've talked about some of the software, some of the automation. So really delivering a full solution to the OEM itself is a way to support the conversion and help OEMs be successful. And so that's something that the Zappi Group's been focused on. And you look at, some of the recent acquisitions, for example, where we've moved away from just the components, but to also the service, because it's really important. And that's how we add value in the process, especially in light of kind of increased competition, cost pressure as components become more commoditized, right? So adding value is an important way to support electrification, quite honestly, and support those OEMs in their electrification journey.
Yeah. I mean, also, if you look at specific components like the battery, there is still debate about energy density, weight, charging speed, efficiency and lifetime, and that there are many still questions to be answered. Even if there are answers to most of these questions, they pop around, like not answered. But I think there are answers today, but still end users, have questions and thinking a lot about it. And yeah.
Yeah, we do partner with at Delta Q on the charging side. We do partner with battery manufacturers to kind of support some of those questions or support answering some of those questions. But absolutely, the conversion from ICE to electric is still not top of mind for all of our OEMs, but particularly given all the other challenges that they're faced with, kind of that we're all faced with day to day in this environment. So being able to provide that support, I think, does enable the move to electrification.
Yeah, we see also some other mitigations like, hybrid approach where you have a battery, you have hydrogen, you have, maybe electric auxiliaries. So you see a little bit of a mix here to overcome these questions, specifically on the battery capacity.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. And so, how are you guys seeing, how are companies evaluating the economics of electrification in the current environment? Maybe Klaus, let's start with you this time.
Well, I think we already have mentioned the total cost of ownership. I think that model is the primary one for the purchasing decision. But we can also see some end users, they are playing out with, different scenarios, sensitivity analysis on how they can improve with an electric system. And here, fleet management systems can improve on routing, for example. And so they are playing out with the mix of the vehicle itself and the supporting system. And this includes, of course, also the infrastructure, the grid cost, and all of that influence a little bit the decisions, I would say. I mentioned also before this residual value comes into play in battery lifetime assumptions. And also uptime metrics are coming into play. And it's a little bit of a mix. I think the main tool is really the total cost of ownership. I would again say, even if today with the digital solutions, you have operational data coming out of the machines, you can look at more data to drive your decisions, and by that also understand the risk you can take in this conversion.
Yeah, and the only thing I'd add there, Klaus, is given the uncertainty of government incentives or future government incentives, and also the uncertainty around some of the government sustainability mandates and things like that, it really comes full circle back to the business case has to make sense, and as combined with kind of end user preference. So it's a compelling reason that somebody's willing to pay for. That is the number one driver. And I think we've talked a lot about it during this session so far. You can see it's really kind of the primary rationale for why companies are converting to electric.
Yeah. We see also some, I mentioned some alternatives, for long range where you go hydrogen or other types of solutions to overcome the issues with a huge battery.
Well, hydrogen's interesting in North America because I'd suggest there's some of the same challenges as we see when it comes to charging around availability of infrastructure to support those kinds of applications. So different technology, but some of the similar challenges in terms of seeing success for kind of long haul vehicles.
Yeah, no, clear. Also you can see that some companies are counting on credits, tax credits,
Yes,
grants, or other incentives to support in the conversion.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, and now you guys were kind of touching on this subject a little bit before, but maybe what role do partnerships and industry collaboration play in advancing electrification from your perspective? I don't know if Klaus, you'd like to start this time on this one?
Yeah, could you repeat that in caption?
Oh, yes, of course. I'm sorry. So what role do you see partnerships and industry collaboration playing in advancing electrification?
No, I think that it's absolutely a need for this collaboration. It's hard to do it on your own. I mean, if you look at China, for example, where it's state-driven, it's different. But I think we can see in Europe clear collaboration between different suppliers to build up more of a solution. And that's what we do at Sappi Group as well. We cannot do everything on our own. We have to collaborate with other suppliers and make a stronger solution together. So I think that's a given that we have to do. We can clearly see it with the OEMs as well. They collaborate on the different technical solutions and to go to market. I think it is necessary. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say I agree, and I mentioned how we partner, for example, with different battery manufacturers to be able to go together to an OEM and with other companies within the Zappi Group to offer a full solution to help support that journey to electrification. So I think it's critical. There are still, less, but some government programs still available in Canada. So accessing some of those and kind of partnering, leveraging some of those. I'm not sure if you'd call it partnership, but working with the government. But really, when we think about the Zappi Group and our relationship with the OEMs, we think of ourselves as partners to our customers, right? And working together on defining and developing the right solution that delivers that business case, that ROI, Klaus, that you've mentioned kind of several times through the presentation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thank you both for all of those great insights. I think we have some time now to address some of the questions that have come in from the audience. So just a reminder again to those of you watching, if you have questions you'd like to submit, please feel free to do so by typing those into the Q&A box on your screen. So one of the first questions we have, you guys were kind of touching on alternative fuels before, but do you have any insights on the adoption of electric vehicles versus other fossil fuel alternatives, such as hydrogen cells, particularly for industrial vehicles?
I don't have it for industrial, but there are some data in China where electrification is really strong. I think they talk about 40% now, and 5-6% is hydrogen. So you have a mix, but electrification is really winning for now. I think in Europe it's a little bit too early to answer, and in North America it's a mix. I think, yeah, also a little bit too early to answer in a way.
What I can add there is that we have some companies locally in the Vancouver area, right? So Ballard Power in hydrogen, for example, and I'd suggest it's been a struggle for them. I think it depends on the application. So Klaus, you talked about kind of some of the long haul where battery charge is an issue, where quite different from in a warehouse where the number of hours of use case before a recharge can happen is much, much shorter. So, but I would definitely say that charging seems to be the number one choice for moving from an ICE engine, just based on what I'm seeing kind of locally with some of the companies around the Vancouver area.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great. All right. Our next question kind of relates to hybrids, which we were touching on before. This person asks, if 100% battery electrification is a challenge, is diesel electric hybrid an interim solution that you guys see? I mean, those programs, they say, can sometimes development programs can still take a while. So would you maybe see battery costs reducing in the next 5 years to maybe then help ease that shift from hybrid into 100% battery electric?
I think there are several hybrid applications ongoing, so you probably going to see a mix, and then you can see it on the passenger car side. So you still have hybrid passenger cars, and you have a mix of that and full electric cars. So yes, I think that could still exist for some years. Yes.
Well, I can just speak to not just, but just as an example. I mean, thinking about Canada, there's been a move. We talked about government incentives. There's been a move away from full electric to hybrid to offset some of the challenges, Klaus, you talked about, right? Range, infrastructure, etc. So that hybrid solution, at least for passenger auto, gives you kind of the best of both worlds, right? So that's been a focus area, and a result also of some of the changing government incentives.
Yeah. I mean, we have seen some. Okay, these are pilots, but where you have a diesel generator charging the battery, and then you have a full electric vehicle on the site because you cannot get the grid capacity to charge. So I don't think you will see much of that, but we have seen such some of that, at least specifically in construction.
Well, and that speaks to the challenges of full electrification, right? That your earlier comments about the availability of infrastructure that can support a move, and that's a perfect example. It seems a bit counterintuitive, but I've seen similar examples.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So another question that we have is, sorry, I'm just trying to read this a little bit. So one of the questions is, where do you see the biggest opportunities for innovation moving forward?
I think we mentioned a little bit around digitalization. I think that could help to drive electrification. We could see it at ConExpo, some autonomous vehicles, which are easier to create if you go electric, and if you can with the autonomous, navigation technology, with fleet management, you can maybe help and drive electrification and justify it because you can do other savings. For example, for delivery trucks in the routing and so on. And also, we have seen it in city bus where you do in process charging. So in a way, the operation is more efficient and so on. So there are many, in combination with the digitalization, I think we're going to see more applications coming, I think.
Yeah, one of the applications we haven't talked about much today, but also the result of robotics and automation and somewhat AI and consumer preference or changing consumer behaviors is things like little delivery bots and or drone delivery, right? Which are today being trialed in across cities in the U.S., replacing perhaps a person on a bike or a person in a car. And that's so you could speak to, I mean, it's really about consumer preference and quick delivery, maximum partial delivery for the company itself, but really user preference for driving this kind of new application where people would like access to everything immediately. And we're seeing that result in new opportunities for electrification. as a direct result of the technology that's now available. So quite interesting. It's very popular in terms of promoting these trials, etc. And we'll see where those markets go, but quite fun new applications that have been technology enabled.
I agree. I mean, we could see at ConExpo, the self-driving autonomous taxis. You can see them in California and so on, and it was heavily pushed on the agriculture side. The same ideas. So, and it's easier to build these vehicles electric. So, I think we're going to see some change there. And it could be new business models. So, that's another driver.
Great. All right. So our next question. So for those who may be earlier in their electrification journey, what are the most important first steps to take in today's environment that you would offer or suggest to those people?
Well, I think we see that pilots are scaling now, where we see a clear total cost of ownership case. So the business case is justified, and that is, of course, helping the adoption in specific application. We clearly see it with where in China where the volume, the scaling is also helping the case because the cost of the vehicle goes down.
But one thing I would say, Sarah, is call us because we can help. As a Zappi group, we can help have a look at the business case and help with how you could convert your system. So the idea is that we can provide a full system solution and work with you to create that kind of prototype or test and these kind of test units that Klaus has mentioned throughout this session.
Yeah, I think it also what we discussed earlier here, the role of partnerships and industry collaboration could help because you share the risk and the cost. We have seen some joint ventures. We have seen some, co-finding and funding and so on ongoing. So yeah, little bit of helping this conversion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. All right. Well, I think we have time for one or two more questions yet. So again, audience, if you have any you would like to submit to our panel, please feel free to do so. But the next question we have, let's see here. What technological challenges still exist in advancing electrification?
I think we have seen it on the battery side. Cost is coming down, but there are still work to be done. I think we can see some new chemistries as well coming. That could be on our side. We clearly see development in the power electronics to improve the size and the performance on systems, and same with motors. Torque density of electric motors improving, and performance in the complete system of integration between electric motor and transmission or axle and so on. That is clearly happening in China. Integration also with software and software systems to support the digitalization of vehicles, and also for preventive maintenance and to be able to control and measure the vehicle application and oversight it, just to mention a few things.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think in terms of the electrification of the system itself, the technology is there, continuously improving. And then when you start to factor in some of these new, kind of auxiliary systems like the telematics or the ability for automation, etc., the systems will continue to improve. I think the challenge, and of course, again, it depends on the market, is the supporting infrastructure. So Klaus, you mentioned that example of a construction site where the equipment might be electric, but it's being charged by a diesel generator. So unless there's a reason for that to be electric, like a noise violation or something like that, there's still a real challenge there about what the overall system looks like if you're having to use a diesel generator. And I think that is so the bigger infrastructure play and what that looks like. The business case for that is kind of one of the remaining kind of challenges around broader electrification. Particularly when it's not mandated by government or supported by government incentives or sustainability requirements. Again, it comes back to business case. So a very interesting time right now, given cost of fuel, etc. The math looks quite different. We'll see how long the situation lasts and whether organizations will start running the numbers again as a result.
Okay, great. Our next question. Given the pace of change over the past year, what is maybe one thing that has surprised you most about how the electrification market has evolved?
Can you repeat again? I didn't catch.
Yes, of
The
course.
pace of change, yes.
Yeah, given the pace of change over the past year, what is one thing that has surprised you the most about how the electrification market has evolved?
Surprised, yes. I think I am a little bit surprised, you could say, regarding the pace in China, how quickly they can scale, but also meeting expectations on performance and quality. It's really impressive, I would say, and as European, a little bit scary. Because Europe is now overwhelmed by Chinese electric vehicles. So that happens very quickly. I think it even surprised the German car manufacturers. So struggling to defend the market. And mentioned earlier, most of the battery supply comes from Asia. And with the geopolitical change coming very quickly now, you have to think about the supply chain and also tariffs coming into play. It could also change the game completely. Where are you sourcing your components? Because the change in manufacturing takes some time. So all of that came quickly. I mean, with the new administration, changed the game completely.
Just further to Sarah's question, one of the things, I'm not sure surprised is the word I'd use, but kind of interested and fascinated about some of these new applications. So I mentioned very briefly humanoids. We've seen through some of our team and some of the trade shows they've been to, the proliferation really of the number of companies with humanoids and how those robots will be kind of implemented in factories. I mean, it makes sense and it's but I find it like quite fascinating and kind of the evolution of the robot, I would say, and where that will go, I think will be very, very interesting. And that is enabled by electrification and new technology. So
Yeah.
I looked back at last year and I think our closing comments last year were about, perhaps things will settle down. Well, absolutely not. This is clearly the new normal, and we'll see where the next week, month, and year goes. But it's definitely exciting times.
No, I agree. I mean, we thought it could be slowing down, but instead, I think uncertainty has increased. You have to do quicker reflection, quicker learning, and quicker change to adapt to the situation which comes. So we cannot really wait. We have to be more quick.
Exactly.
Okay, great. Well, I think that's all the time we have for this session. So, Sarah and Klaus, thank you so much for your time today and providing your great insights on where you're seeing electrification at today. And thank you to our audience so much for joining us. And I hope everyone has a great rest of the day.